Hello everyone, my name is Reina DeJute and welcome to my Module 13 technical demo for the Rocket Food Delivery app. It's a food delivery app with a React Native front end built in Expo to a Java Spring Boot backend over a REST API. Just to set expectations up front, backend was provided as course material, so this module was about building the mobile front end, so that's what I'll be demonstrating in this video. I'll keep this to two parts. First, I'll walk through the app live and show every requirement working, and then I'll go into my front end code and explain how each piece is implemented, including how it talks to the API. So let's start here at the login screen. So this right here is the login page, and it matches the wireframe that was provided. So the same layout and the colors come straight from the design system. These are defined in a constants folder, so they stay consistent throughout the entire app. So the login page takes an email and a password. So if I put the wrong credentials in here, for instance, if I put the wrong password, we can see that an error message comes up telling me that the login has failed. The reason it works this way is because our screen calls our auth function, and when the server responds with a 401 unauthorized, that gets caught and turned into a readable error message instead of just failing silently. So now, with the correct email and password, I should log in and it should take me straight to the restaurants page, which it does. And one important thing worth noting here is that this isn't hitting a local host address. So every request in this app goes through an ngrok tunnel, so the phone can actually read my local Java server and database from outside of my machine. That tunnel URL is what all my fetch requests are pointed at. So when I just logged in, that request traveled through ngrok to the backend checked my credentials and sent back a token. And we'll look at exactly how that token works in the code section. So as we can see on this login page, the header and the footer is immediately visible. They show up on every page except the login screen. That's intentional because there's nothing to navigate to until you're authenticated. The header has the Rocket Food Delivery logo and a logout button right up here at the top, and the footer has my two tabs, the restaurants and our order history. So I can move between the two main sections of the app, and I'll come back to the logout at the very end. So this is the restaurants page, and it matches the wireframe, so it's a 2-column grid of cards. When I first land here, every restaurant is shown with no filters applied. Each restaurant has an image, the restaurant name, the pricing tier with dollar signs, and some of them have the rating. The rating you're seeing is actually calculated on the back end as an average across that restaurant's orders, so it's real data and not hard-coded. And I can also filter these. So up here I have a rating filter and a price filter. When nothing is selected, they just show placeholder text so you know that they're empty. If I filter by rating, then the list narrows down to restaurants that match. I can also filter by price as well, or use both together. The reason this stays fast is the filter list is mem-wise, so it only recalculates when the filter actually changes, not at every single render. And when I tap on a restaurant, it takes me to that restaurant's menu page, passing the restaurant along so the menu knows which one to load. And here's the menu. It also matches the wireframe. Every item starts at a quantity of 0. You can only change the quantity by using these plus and minus buttons, so there's no typing a number in, which keeps the input controlled and valid, and it can't go below 0. So tapping minus on a 0 item does nothing. And notice that that create order button up here is disabled and grayed out right now. The reason it's disabled is because all of my quantities are 0. So there's nothing to order yet. As soon as I add at least one item with the plus button, then that button becomes active. And every restaurant menu item uses this same image. That's by design for this build. And here's something that's worth showing. If I go back and I pick a different restaurant, all the quantities reset to 0. The reason that happens is because each menu's quantities live in that screen's own local state, keyed by item. So a new restaurant starts with a clean slate instead of carrying over what I picked somewhere else. Now if we add a few different items and tap create order, that opens up the order confirmation modal. This modal also matches the wireframe and it shows accurate details, each product name, the quantity I picked, and the line totals, plus that grand total at the bottom. And every price is in proper currency format with the dollar sign and 2 decimals. That formatting matters because on the back end, prices are stored as whole dollar integers, so the front end formats them into proper currency for display. And when I tap confirm order, watch the button. So while it's waiting on the server, it disables itself and shows a processing state. So I can't double submit. And then on success, a green checkmark appears and a thank you message confirming that the order went through. The reason for the distinct states in modals is that it tracks where the request is, either idle, processing, success, or error. And it renders a different UI for each one. So there's always clear feedback. And in order to test that this create order handles errors well, I'm going to stop ngrok in the background and try to submit that again. So if I go here, we hit Control C. Let's open that emulator back up, and if we hit create order, and then when we hit confirm order, unable to place order, please try again. So this simulates if for whatever reason the server is unreachable, the confirm button comes back with a red X icon and a failure message, instead of leaving me stuck on a frozen screen. Now let's get that ngrok pulled back up. Alright, so now that our ngrok tunnel is live again, let's take a look at our application again. So now switching to the order history tab, this page shows my past orders in a structured table with 3 columns, so order, status, and view. Status values get formatted to read cleanly, and in the view column, tapping the little icon opens up that detail modal for the order. And this is the order history detail modal. It pulls the full record for that order, so the restaurant name, order date, status, and the courier that was assigned to it. And then the body lists every product with its quantity and price and the total at the bottom. So this complete order detail is all coming from the backend. And then to close the loop, if we hit logout, it will clear my session and sends me right back to the login page, which confirms the whole auth flow from front to back. That's the full functional demo, so now let's get into the code a little bit and check out what's happening. So here is how the project's organized. It's 2 parts in one repo. So the server Java folder is the Spring Boot backend, and it follows a layered structure. So the controllers handle the HTTP requests, service holds logic, repositories talk to the database, and models are the JPA entities that map to my tables. So the reason it's split like this is because each layer has one job. The controller doesn't know about the database, and the repository doesn't know about the HTTP. On the front end, inside of the client folder, is what is called our Expo app. So this is also organized by responsibility too. So we've got screens, which is our full pages. We have components, which is our reusable pieces. Navigation wires all of our screens together. Services and API makes our network calls, and then context holds shared state, and then its folder called constants keeps things like API URLs and brand colors. So our navigation is built in 3 nested levels, and that's deliberate in this app. At the top is a root stack navigator, and we can see that right here in this function root navigator. This is what is the authentication gate. So the reason a stack sits at the root is it decides the big either or. So if I'm not logged in, it shows the login stack. Once I have a token, it swaps to the main app. Inside the main app is a tab navigator, and that's the second level. So what really defines this file is what we can see right here. So if is restoring session, then return splash screen. This is our top level navigation tree. So this is what gates access to the rest of the app. And then inside of this app, we have tab navigator. This is the second level, and it's what gives me the 2 bottom tabs that are on our screen. So restaurants and order history. Then inside the restaurants tab, there's another stack navigator called Restaurant Stack. This is the third level, and it handles moving from the restaurant list to an individual restaurant menu. So it's a stack holding a tab navigator, and the tabs each hold their own stack. So that nesting is what lets each tab keep its own independent navigation history. We take a look at this auth context.js. So when it comes to state, the most important piece is this auth context, which wraps the whole app. The reason that I use context here instead of passing props down is that the login token and the current user are needed all over the app by the navigator to decide what to show, and by every screen that makes an API call. Context lets any screen read that with a single hook instead of having to thread it through every single layer. It holds the token and the user and exposes the sign in and then the sign out as well. See right there. Sign in saves the token to async storage, so the session survives a restart, and sign out clears it. On app launch, it reads async storage back. That's why if I'm already logged in, the app skips the login screen and goes straight in. And if we take a look at constants API.js. So now for the API calls. My base URL and all my endpoints are defined in this one API.js constant file. So the base URL comes from an environment variable, which is the ngrok tunnel address that I mentioned at the beginning. So I never hard code it. I can point the whole app to a new tunnel by just changing one value. And then take a look at orders.js. This is a service function. This is the create order. So the key thing is in this header, every authenticated request attaches the token as a bearer token in the authorization header. The reason it has to is the backend protects all of these routes. So without that header, the server rejects the request. And the body sends the restaurant ID, the customer ID, and the array of products or quantity, which is exactly what the backend expects. Backend in this project handles verifying credentials and issuing the token. So I won't dig into the code that was provided to me, but what my app does with that is what the interesting part of this is. So when I log in, I send the email and the password, the auth endpoint, and the API sends back a JWT, a signed token that stands in for my identity. The reason this is nice on the client side is that it's stateless, so I don't keep a server session, I just hold on to the token and I store it in the auth context and in async storage. So from then on, every request I make attaches that token as a bearer header. The backend reads that header to confirm who I am. So my job here is really managing that token's lifecycle. So getting it on login, attaching it to every call, and then clearing it on logout. The logic for that lives in here inside of our login screen.js. So to put my front end together end to end, I'll trace one order. So if I tap confirm order on the menu screen, that reads the quantities from my local state and calls create order in my service layer, which sends a post request through the ngrok tunnel with my bearer token attached. The provided backend validates the token, stores the order, and sends the result back. And my modal picks up that success response and shows the green check mark. So from the front end side, one button tap touches my screen state, my service layer, the token I'm managing, and the response handling that updates the UI. That's the slice I built working with the API. That's the Rocket Food delivery app, every page working live, and the front-end code behind each one. The nested navigation, the auth context and token handling, the API service layer, and how an order flows from a button tap out to the API and back into the UI. The backend was provided, so this was all about building the mobile side and wiring it up cleanly. So that's all I have for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.